Hi, I'd like to begin by acknowledging and paying respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which I stand today. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders listening today. Also paying my respects to your elders, past, present, and emerging. My name is Lana Hirschowitz, and today I'm talking to Joanne Fedler. Joanne is the author of 13 books and has also set up her own publishing company called Joanne Fedler Media. Joanne's latest book is Unbecoming. Joanne, for people who haven't read the book, can you just briefly tell us what it's about?
Okay, so Unbecoming, which is
yes,
hardcover. Unbecoming is, well, it was ostensibly the third in a trilogy that I started many, many years ago when I had small children. The first was called Secret Mother's Business, and it was about a group of women who went away together overnight, friends, and they discussed motherhood, and they drank a lot, and they ate a lot, and they sort of shared all these sort of secrets about motherhood, all the taboos. And for some strange reason, this book did really, really well in Germany. And 7 years later, I then wrote a sequel called The Reunion, which was about some of those women getting together again. Their children are now a little bit older. They all have moved on in different ways in their marriages. Perhaps some of them are divorced or whatever. And they're all dealing with different issues. And they go away for a weekend with some new characters. And they talk about what mothering was like for them then. And then my German publisher commissioned this third, which I hadn't ever intended really, I guess, to write. And it's obviously now 7 or 8 years later, and some of these women, actually none of the women from the original books are in it. It's really about the main character. She is in a place where she's in her midlife, and her children are empty nesting, and she decides to go away and take a sabbatical from her marriage, and she goes off by herself for 3 months and bumps into one of the mothers from the first book, whom she hasn't seen in all this time. A lot of things have happened during that time, and this woman invites her to come on a silent sacred walk into the Australian bush to celebrate her 57th birthday, and she agrees to go. And it's with a group of strangers. Other than this woman, she doesn't know anyone, and off they go and they spend a night in the wilderness. This group of women. That's what this book is about.
It's about much more than that, but yes.
Right. That's what happens.
Okay. And I know this is a question frequently asked of women writers and very seldomly of men, and I hate to perpetuate it, but there is a lot of you in this book. The main protagonist is Jo. You're Joanne. She's a writer. She's from South Africa. She's got a lot in common with you. And it's clearly a work of fiction as well. So how much of, and there's this character also, which I know is true of you, is very passionate about the earth and the climate and that. How much of you is in that book?
Look, I think that there is a lot of me in the sense that the issues that the book is tackling and the emotional terrain that the book is tackling is all where I'm at, as the previous two books have been. It's really me trying to say something about this particular time of life. The facts of her children and where she finds herself, some of them are a little bit true, not really true. I've borrowed things, I've mixed things up, I've changed things, so that the problem was the first book was really based on an actual evening that had been spent with girlfriends. So that one was actually came out in Australia as narrative non-fiction, although it was published in Germany as fiction. And then the second book was sort of loosely based on a weekend with girlfriends, but it was all kind of fiction as well. And now because this was like it was a sequel, I had to sort of retain an aspect of that first author, that first protagonist's identity. And actually, Lana, that was part of what was so difficult about writing, because I kind of have felt that I am such a different person from the woman who wrote Secret Mother's Business, there's so little of me that is left, you know. So part of my struggle was to try and be authentic to my own experience. But at the same time, it is, as you say, it is entirely a work of fiction in the sense that, you know, all the things that happen are kind of based loosely on some of my own stuff. I think a lot of fiction happens like this. But I did actually, to try and embody this experience of being out in the wild, I did go away with a group of women and spend 2 nights in a cave. I did want to know what it was like. We did make fires, and we sang and we told stories. And another friend of mine, when I was really battling to work out where this book would be located, and I was trying to think of all the different places in Australia. I thought maybe at one point it would be like in the outback. And a friend of mine who has lived there, she met me in Central Australia in Alice Springs and took me, and we spent a night in swags under the stars in the middle of winter. And so I did spend a night like that.
For your craft,
yeah, for my craft. I was really just trying to, so that I could speak authentically about, you know, the issues that arise, because otherwise, you know, it would have just been, you know, all made up. And I think there are things you have to experience in order to know what you're writing about. So
I mean, that said, I felt like the book was about me as well. And I mean, obviously it's none of my experience, but I think that the fact that it touched on, you know, that midlife experience, and that, you know, so many of the things that I read, I was like, you know, how did it get into my head? Because it's a thing that I think it's an age thing as well as anything else.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I did want to, you know, to be honest, there was also a part of me that had a kind of very strong reaction to a movie that came out, I think last year, called Wine Country, with Amy Poehler and Tina Fey, who are both actresses I really love and admire. And I was so excited that there was a movie about, you know, women in their 50s, because it was all about, you know.
Was this before you watched it or after you watched it?
So I was excited before. I was so excited. Oh, there's a movie that's coming out about us, women like us.
Yes.
And I watched this movie, and by the end of it, I was enraged. I was enraged that women of our age could be made out to be so ridiculous and juvenile and unsophisticated in their thinking, and not wise and not embodied. And they just seem to be like hankering after something that I would think that by the time you got here, you would have kind of moved through that. But they seem to embody this really immature, what I consider to be like not a mature sensibility about being where we are. It was like they were just trying to be somewhere else all the time, you know, wanting to be sexually attractive to these young men, and just
not relatable, and not relatable to your group of friends either, I'm sure, because not to mine either.
And so when I wrote this book, I said I want to write something that is completely different from Wine Country. But of course, what was so challenging about that, because I wanted to write about women who were wise and embodied and unbitchy and not competitive. Now, the problem with writing a whole set of characters like that is that where is the conflict then? Because obviously when you've got a whole set of characters, what you do need is for people to trigger each other and for there to be pettinesses and all sorts of things. So those were some of the challenges of writing about women like us.
Yeah. And I noticed there was, I mean, without giving too much away for people who haven't read it, there was one character who I thought in the beginning, I'm really not going to like her, because I didn't like, and then I actually thought, oh, like, there's so much of her, of me and her, and I understand where she was coming from. And she was a person I really thought I would never like. And then I actually really liked her.
I'm so glad to hear that, because of course, you know, I think that is really what I wanted for people to experience, is how our judgments and our preconceptions and our assumptions about other women, you know, they sort of come in and we make them very quickly. And that as soon as you hear someone's story, how those judgments that you have and those critiques that you have about someone else's choices just fall away. And I feel like that really is such a characteristic of this time of life. I feel so unable now, where I am, to judge other people. It seems to be such a ridiculous idea that I would assume or have the ego to imagine that I know that what path that person is walking, therefore might have some kind of moral judgment about them. Whereas when you're young, you sort of have this kind of hubris that you've got it wrapped up, the way you're living your life, whatever. I feel like those things fall away. And if they haven't, well, that is your work then, because I think so much, we also spend so much time as young women so self-critical, and that's where that judgment of other people come in. I mean, if you're judging other people, you must know that your own internal voice is being incredibly unkind. And I hope that by the time we get to where we are, that voice is so softened, almost to be inaudible, and a kind of deep self-love has come in. And that, I think, comes from just having lived long enough to have lost friends, girlfriends, sisters, parents, to have seen people die before they even got to where we are. And so you kind of have a lot more compassion for people's mistakes and for your own errors.
Yeah. I'm just talking about this group of people. They all obviously come with their own issues and complexities, which unravel as they go. But they're all also, as you say, they're not the people from the previous books, but they're all from very different walks of life and different parts of the world. How important were those backgrounds, those parts of the world to the story?
Well, Lana, the first two books, were sort of, in a way, quite sort of like the group of characters was sort of very homogenous, because I think when you are a young mother, you end up kind of mixing with people who, your children,
same school, same play
school,
group,
whatever it is. And so you kind of get locked into a certain way of interacting with people and the certain group of people that you interact with. And so it was very important to me at a time now when we're making decisions about our friendships that are not about our children anymore, and who our children's friends, parents are, and you have this kind of ultimate freedom to decide who you're going to be friends with, how suddenly the whole world opens up. And so yes, you have people who come from different countries and speak different languages and have different religions and all sorts of things that you probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to before. So to really get there was this way in which I had this kind of overarching idea, without sort of wanting to make it seem too arithmetical or sort of like overthought. I did want to sort of get a sense of people from different places, religions, backgrounds, and just so that you would have different voices that were coming at you, and also because Australia, because it's set in Australia, it is such a diverse culture. Not many of us get a chance to experience how diverse it is, but if you just get out of your own little world, you do have a sense of how enormous this country is and how many cultures there are and how many opportunities you have to meet people from different walks of life and different backgrounds. So it was a very important part, because I think at this time of life, we do open up into a more expansive consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I noticed in your book, and I've seen it in some of your other writing, is about your character's attitude to food and to what they eat, how they eat, how they experience the joy of it or the non-joy of it. And it's obviously something you've written about before. And there's a character in this particular book, in Unbecoming, Yasmin, who really uses food to express her love, not just for the people on the hike, but for her family and for asylum seekers in her welcome feasts. And we later found out that her daughter has an eating disorder where she's actually doing the exact opposite of her mother. She's pushing food away. But there's really a strong sense of food in the book. Even in the end, there's the menu of what they ate around the farm, which I absolutely loved. I got quite hungry reading it, but the taste, I could actually feel them. So just tell me, how much does that food impact on your characters? Like, do you talk about, do your characters live through your food a bit, like through the way they eat?
Well, the first two books were very food driven. The first book was really all about this kind of feast that these women prepare for one another and share food. They share food. And I do feel like food is one of those languages that cuts across cultures and brings people together. And one of the people that I've dedicated the book to is my mother, because my mother is one of those people whose love language is food.
So
I'm
smart.
very expressive.
Not feeding people.
I know, and for me as well, I'm also a feeder, and I do love to, you know, to show people how I feel about them by spending time, you know, welcoming them. I think there is, you know, you give people such a sense of hospitality when you cook for them and you put food out for them, and it also expresses people's heritage and their
Culture,
culture and their
absolutely.
backgrounds and its memory, and it's all those beautiful things, and it's something that really, amongst all the things that divide us in this world, it's one of those things I think that really can bring people together. So it was a theme that my German publisher sort of wanted, because the first book was so successful. I think they sort of, some of the recipe of that first book, they wanted me to retain. And I really had to, because this was a hike and there wasn't really going to be, you know, a kitchen and a place for, you know, for food to be prepared. Everything had to kind of be carried and brought out. You know, there is one chapter, probably maybe my favorite chapter, where the two of the women are cooking together. Yasmin is one of them, and the main character, and there is this interaction between the two of them, and that is such an important chapter to me. I actually loved writing that chapter because I felt my mother in that chapter, and I also felt the appreciation of what, even in the smallest meal that you create for somebody, of what can be expressed and how you can express yourself, you know, through the way you prepare food. Is such a beautification of an interaction when you prepare food in a particular way. You know, it can be done with so much care and love, and such
And it's a
mind.
real bonding experience, that sharing that
Absolutely,
food.
absolutely, you know, and it's a way of including people, you know. Here, have a piece of cake, you know.
Yeah.
It's just,
Have my last chip.
that's right, exactly. Have my last chip, have my last sip of water, whatever it may be. There is just a way in which, you know, these sorts of things kind of pull us together. And those were some of the things that I was really looking for in this book, because the context of all of this is that they're walking into the wild and having these intimate conversations, but around them there is just this sense of the hurting earth, and these forces beyond our control that are happening, you know.
Yeah, because I wanted to talk to you about that, because it's clear your love for the earth in the book, and your allusion, you know, like the heating of menopause and the heating of the earth. It was really, I felt that. And obviously you're very passionate about that. How important is to you, like, is it a thing that keeps you awake at night? Do you think you have to keep that message into your stories? Is it something you want to educate the world in?
Look, that would be beyond my wildest dreams if I thought I could have any impact in educating anybody or drawing anyone's attention to it. I mean, if David Attenborough hasn't done that for us, and if my octopus teacher hasn't done that for us, then
We need it from all around us.
What I wanted to do, though, was I wanted to make connections, these sort of maybe unlikely connections, as you say. Like, I feel like women, particularly women in our midlife who are going through menopause and understanding this heating, might have a sensibility about what is going on the earth. And as our attention on our offspring, you know, is sort of dissipating, and we're sort of lifting up our eyes and looking around us, you know, that, you know, like 90% of volunteer work and work that is done around animals and around the environment is done by women in their midlives. Women in their midlives are the ones who commit themselves after they've raised their children to taking care of the planet. That just seems to be the reality. So for me, in a way, I wanted to kind of honor that. And every single woman, as it turns out, is doing something remarkable, but so humble that she wouldn't even think to mention it. But yet when they speak about what they're doing, you go, wow, that is just such an amazing thing to do. Because for me, I think women are remarkable. I find women to be so underrated, men so overrated, and women so underrated, that when you get a woman to talk about what she does with her time and her life and those small things, she wouldn't think to mention perhaps that she invites, as you said, Yasmin does, invites newcomers into her home and feeds them, and other, you know, what different people are doing, taking care of elderly parents, taking care of sick children with mental health issues. They wouldn't think to mention, I'm doing this heroic
It's
work.
just a thing that they do. They don't, yeah.
It's just what we do.
Yeah.
And so I sort of wanted to honor that, and also, you know, for women perhaps who are feeling like they are in grief because they've got this empty nest, to sort of just maybe remind them that we don't have an empty nest on this planet. We have need for a lot of work in any area that you choose that calls your heart, whether it is planting trees or taking care of the ocean or taking care of animals, or, you know, violence against women, whatever the issue may be that calls to you, that there is such good work still that we need to do. And now we do have the space and the time to bring ourselves to that work. So
absolutely, which brings me to another thing that I wanted to ask you about. You know, obviously the book is aimed at anybody, any woman in their midlife, and I think men as well, to understand. I think it gives a great understanding of what's going on in the life of your partner or mother or your sister or aunt or whatever colleague that you work with. But but you do speak about the parenting of adult children in a way that, I mean, that is really like, you know, I don't think anybody couldn't relate to it if they've got adult children, because I think what our biggest job as parents is to let our children go. It's also the hardest thing, because although intellectually we know it's great, it's really difficult to watch them go
the hardest
and form their own lives. And it's what you want. And you think back to when you were a teenager and how desperately you wanted to be, you know, independent in that. And I think that, do you think that maybe when our children leave the home or whatever, it's actually, instead of like a midlife, it's a new life. It's a beginning of a life. It's a life where we can go and say, now I'm going to do something for the planet. I'm going to parent the planet because I've got so much love to give, and somebody who's quite resistant to it.
Right.
Is it a time where we become rebellious and where we start to see a new beginning?
I think that you know, that the grief is like the necessary crucible for whatever happens next. And so, like, for those of us who sort of hang on too tightly to our children and sort of strangle them into some kind of like compliance or allegiance to our needs, I do think that at some point we might come to realize that is not the way to parent a young adult, and that the best way to parent a young adult is to fully, you know, not to clip their wings, and to really just try and be that sort of the wind beneath their wings. And as you say, that is in every bit of parenting that we will have to do. It will be the hardest task that we will have to do, and we will probably try and fail and try and fail and try and fail and maybe succeed a little bit and try and fail, but it's the job of where we're at. It's the absolute job of where we're at. And what is so hard, Lana, for me about this is that all the years that have led up to this parent that we became, you know, that was the whole job of Secret Mother's business and the whole job of what I wrote about in the reunion. All that has to now be dissolved, and we have to unbecome that person and let go of that person. And for me, if one is unable to hold the paradox, that's this incredible paradox, you know, I think it's going to be an impossible bridge to cross, because you know, we will stumble on our grief. We will become attached to something we cannot hold on to. And yet, you know, if we continue to try, I think what we will do is we will pass suffering onto our children in a way that we don't want to. We know we don't want to do it. You know, intellectually we know we don't want to be that parent. And so it's such a conscious, you know, they talk about conscious uncoupling when a couple decides to like divorce. This is the most conscious uncoupling we will ever be asked to do. And it's almost in a way makes you think, I don't know what the hell that was all for then. You know, like, why did I try so hard to be such a damn good mother, when in the end, basically, I'm sort of stepping back and I'm not there anymore for them. You know?
And I think that sometimes the mark of a good parent is actually the stepping back, because you have, you know, and letting your children go into the world and be independent, and, you know,
Always.
their desire to be independent shows that you were a good parent.
You see, that's the paradox.
Yeah.
The paradox is that if you've done a good job, your children will turn around without looking back and going, Mom, are you okay? They'll go, bye, Mom, see ya.
Exactly.
While you sort of,
I've done brilliantly then.
I've done a great job. That is the mark of a good parent. I've got a friend whose children phone her all the time. Adult children call her every day and check in on her. And I was like, why can't my children do that? And then I realized my children don't feel the need to check in on me because they know that I'm going to be okay. Well, I hope they think I'm okay. I don't think they're being mean.
No, and also they know that you love and care about them. You don't have to keep telling them. They're living their lives fulfilled and happy and confident in their love.
Absolutely. So when I went away for 8 days and I didn't hear from either of my children, my husband said, you've done a great job. They're not worried about you. They know you're okay. They don't feel they've got to check in on you. And I realized that, of course, if they went away for 8 days, I'd be the one checking in on them all the time. And what a pain it is for somebody to be constantly checking in on you. So I feel like they are teaching me something that I need to learn. And it's so painful. But the pain is like a kind, it is that birth into something, that will happen. And why I just love the cover of this book so much is the way that the designer broke the word down into parts, this unbecoming. So the way we have to kind of like shatter and break apart. But if you have a look at it as well, it's just a beautiful, it's also a thing in itself. This broken word is a beautiful thing in itself. And it's almost like that notion, that beautiful Japanese notion of kintsugi, which is something that is broken and then fixed with gold resin so that the place that has been broken is the most beautiful part of the object. And so I feel like definitely this phase of life, this midlife phase, is probably one of the most exciting, potentially fulfilling, liberating time of our lives, because I think up until now, many of us have not actually ever known what it is like to really be free. To be free of a certain kind of responsibility that has marked our lives right up until this time. And those of us who are lucky enough, because to be in your midlife, and not to have died before this moment is a great gift. My book is also dedicated to two of my friends whom I've lost in the last couple of years. The one was 35 when she died, and the other one was 58. It's like really too soon, and so for me, in a way as well, this book is about saying, if you're here, how lucky are you to be at this place? How blessed are you to be in this place? And let's celebrate that, and however you choose to celebrate it. And I feel we're kind of like, because you don't have to worry about your what your children think or what anybody else thinks, you're sort of at this time in your life where you can honestly like break into a kind of sense of yourself that perhaps you've never ever allowed yourself to have before. That's how I feel. I honestly feel like I am so suggestible that I could just do anything right now. Everything is up for grabs, and I love that feeling. I've never had it before.
Yeah, well, it's beautiful, and it's beautifully expressed in your book. It really, I mean, I think everyone should read it. It's beautiful. It's relatable. It's, it's about, it might be about a hug, but it's about so much more. It's about parenting. It's about love, and it's about friendship and the support of women and the female friendship and that strength. I felt like reading it like I was in the company of wise women. I felt like supported, and it made me look at my friends and the conversations we have, because I think you're right, we don't have conversations like they had in Wine Country. I mean, when you mentioned Wine Country, I thought, oh my gosh, like we don't do that. We don't fuss about boys and men or young, trying to make ourselves look sexy. We talk about real stuff, which I felt like reading your book was sitting down with good friends and talking about things that matter to me, and it was a beautiful book. Thank you.
Thank you, Lana. Thank you so much for your incredible reaction to it. I mean, I have to say, every time somebody reads it and comes back to me, it's sort of, I get this like little, feeling. But what I did was I did a lot of research and asked a lot of women what are the things that you talk about? What are the things you talk about with your girlfriends? And I collected ideas and conversations, and I had lots of virtual conversations with women. And so all of it has come from women in their midlives. This is not me. This is the stuff that I know we talk about and I know we care about. And so I'm so grateful, and I hope I have done justice and honored women's lives in this book. So thank you so much.
Thank you for writing it, Jo. I loved it.
Thank you.
Thank you.